Good morning. It is so good to see you guys this morning. I was so sick yesterday. I did not even film a video. But today I'm feeling better and we're gonna do a get ready with me while you get to know me. Okay, let's do a get ready with me while you get to know me kind of deal, because since I just started posting on this channel consistently, a lot of you don't know me very well. My name is Jordyn. I am the mother to 5 tiny little humans. I have been married for almost 11 years. We're celebrating our 11-year anniversary in February. My husband and I, we met at work, at a place where we worked. We had known each other for 4 years before we started dating. And then once we started dating in September and we're married in February. So after we started dating, it went pretty quickly. And now we have been happily married for the last 11 years. When we got married, we were pregnant already with our oldest child. He will turn 11 this summer. When we found out we were pregnant, we were planning our wedding already for April. But because we found out we were pregnant, we decided to have a wedding in February, just so we were a little further away from the arrival of our child, which ended up being a really good thing because he was due at the end of July, our baby, and he came at the beginning of June. He was 7 weeks early, and he was an emergency C-section. I got diagnosed with preeclampsia at 32 weeks. At my 32-week appointment, I went in and found out that there was protein in my urine, which is one of the signs of preeclampsia, but my blood pressure was really low. So they decided that I would come in a couple of days. They decided I would come in a couple of days and get my blood pressure checked. And when I went in the middle of the week, my blood pressure was slightly elevated, but not to a concerning point. So they decided that I would go in on Saturday that day, and they were just gonna send me into the hospital for a blood pressure check / like non-stress test for the baby. And so I went in to the hospital that Saturday. I went into my work, and we had a huge event going on at work. But I went in that morning and I told my boss that I was just running to the hospital to get my blood pressure checked, and I would be right back. I would be back in time for the event. Then I went to the hospital. They checked my blood pressure and they admitted me. They said that they wanted to watch me for a couple of hours and just see if my blood pressure went down while I was lying down, because it was fairly high. Unfortunately, on this particular weekend, my doctor was on a camping trip in the mountains and they could not get a hold of him. So the hospital was just trying their best to just monitor me. They had like an on-call doctor there, but they were really trying hard to get a hold of my doctor. And then, long story short, I think I've already shared this story on my channel. So if you want to go look, yeah, I can put the full birth story in my comments, so you guys can go check that out. But eventually, long story short, my doctor did end up coming back from his camping trip, and we delivered my son 7 weeks early. Because he was born so early, he did have to stay in the NICU, and the hospital we were at did not have they didn't have a NICU that was properly equipped for a baby who was born that early. So he was actually life flighted to a different hospital, which was probably the source of the PTSD I was later diagnosed with. The whole situation was insane, but he is happy and healthy now. He is about to turn 11 this summer, and he is just, it all feels like it was just a crazy dream at this point. All that to say that if you are a mom who has a baby in the NICU right now, for us at least, it got better, and I hope it gets better for you. After we had my first son, and it was so traumatic, I was pretty sure I was never going to have another baby. But then we got pregnant by surprise with our daughter, and her pregnancy and birth was absolutely perfect. It totally, I want to say, cured me of my fear of ever having another child, which was good because all of the rest of my pregnancies were extremely rough. But her birth was perfect. If I could have a birth like that every single time, I would have had 87,000 children because it was just magical. After she was born, we ended up having another child. About all of my kids, except for the last two, are about 2 years apart. So about 2 years later, we had our third child, and his birth was a little bit scary as well. He was also born, his wasn't technically an emergency C-section. His was an unplanned C-section because we had gone in again because I was having blood pressure issues, and they were afraid that I was diagnosed with prenatal hypertension, and they were afraid that it was only going to get worse. So they delivered him at 37 weeks, and it ended up being a huge blessing that he was born, that they decided to do a C-section with him, because he was actually born with something called craniosynostosis, which is where, I don't know if you know, but when you're born, your skull is in a bunch of different pieces so that the baby can fit through the birth canal, and their head is kind of malleable. And then as they grow up, those pieces fuse together, usually by age 2, and they fuse together to form the skull. 2 of his little pieces were already fused together when he was born. So he had like a triangle shaped head, which people do still give birth without having to have a C-section when their children have that, but it is a little bit harder because their skull doesn't, it's not as malleable. It's a little bit harder for them to get out that way. So we were actually kind of blessed that he had that. Unfortunately, the hospital handled his birth very, very bizarrely. Another quick fact about babies is that when they are born, they usually have holes in their heart and their lungs that close up when the baby takes their first breath or over the first few hours of being earthside. Because he was born a little early, the ones in his lungs didn't fully close with his first breath like a normal baby's would. They took a little bit longer. So they were taking a little, I don't know if it was an x-ray, but they were trying to see if the holes had closed, and they took it right as he was breathing. So it obscured the picture, and a nurse, not a doctor, but a nurse came in, and she told me, she went on and on about how his lungs were on the, in the wrong spot, and they were thinking that they were going to have to send him up to the big children's hospital that we have here, and that he was probably not going to come home with us. And then she left. She just left. She didn't come back and check on me for several hours, and I just cried because my PTSD from my first child, who was life-flighted from me the second he was born, came back full force. Luckily, the next morning, our pediatrician came to check on the baby. That's something that they always do. But he came and he had looked at the x-rays, and he had ordered more because he could tell that it was obscured. That wasn't what it looked like. And because he could tell that it was blurry because the baby was breathing. So they did another x-ray. Everything looked fine. He came in and I told him like what the nurse had told me. And he was kind of shocked that she would come in and tell me that without fully knowing what was going on. But the baby was fine. He wasn't transferred hospitals. And we were very lucky. Our fourth baby was also born C-section for the same reason that our third child was born C-section, because I got prenatal hypertension and it just made it so that it wasn't very safe for me to deliver naturally. So he was also born at 37 weeks. Aside from that, he didn't have any issues. He was born during COVID, so we had no hospital visitors, which was actually kind of nice. We loved our family and we loved having them there, but it was kind of nice to have the whole first couple days with our baby just be us and him. It was rare and it wasn't something that we had gotten ever. We didn't even get it with our first baby because he was born so early. Our last baby, our little straggler, she is, she's about 18 months now. She'll be 18 months in February, at the beginning of February. And she was also born at 37 weeks from prenatal hypertension. And her birth seemed very normal, except for afterward, I started to get really bad headaches and they were lasting for several days. And I was on C-section medication. So there is no way I should have been having a headache. So I called the doctor and the doctor was like, why don't you come in? Like, if you're having headaches this bad, please come in. So I go in and turns out my blood pressure was through the roof. Turns out I had postpartum preeclampsia, which I didn't even know that you could get. I didn't even know that that was a thing, but it is. And I had to go to the emergency room, and they took care of me there. Luckily, I didn't have to stay overnight. I only had to stay for a few hours, but I had to leave my 5-day-old baby with a babysitter. And now, granted, it was my sister-in-laws, who are both very, very well equipped to take care of 5 children, including a newborn. So they were in really good hands, but it was incredibly challenging to leave my newborn baby with a babysitter at only 5 days old. It was also really scary because like we didn't know what was gonna happen. We didn't know how long we were gonna be there. We know that it is scary, it is dangerous, it is not something to be taken lightly. So yeah, we were pretty scared. But now we are done having children. We have decided to have no more. We've decided that 5 is our magic number. In fact, when I was pregnant with our third child, I had a gut feeling that we were gonna have a little girl. And I was like, oh, it's a little girl. And at that point, our plan was to have 3 children. And we went in to the ultrasound and found out that he was indeed a little boy. And I wasn't disappointed. Like I wasn't sad that he was a boy. We were very grateful for him and we knew, but I was a little bit confused because with my other 2, I had been so certain that they were going to be the gender that they were, and I was correct. So I was a little bit taken aback because I was like, my motherly intuition is broken. And like I said, I wasn't sad or anything. And for a little while in that pregnancy, we still had planned it to be our last child, but I had this feeling that wouldn't go away, that I was supposed to have another daughter and that my daughter was supposed to have a sister. And it just ate at me a little bit. So I brought it up to my husband. I told him that I think that we're supposed to have another daughter and that this was not our last pregnancy. And he was like, but Jordyn, what if we have a baby a fourth baby and it turns out to be a little boy. And I said, then we will have 5 because I feel like there is a little girl waiting for us that's supposed to join our family. And sure enough, we did have a 4th and he was a boy, or he is a boy. And then we did hum and haw over whether or not we would have a 5th baby, just because, you know, 5 is a lot. So we took our time really thinking about it, and we both did feel like we were supposed to have another baby, but that this time it would be our last baby, whether it was a boy or a girl. And when we got pregnant with our daughter, we both immediately felt at peace with that decision. We knew that this was it. And like I said, we had discussed, regardless of whether or not it was a boy or girl, 5 was probably our limit, and that we were going to be finished after that. We had discussed names for the baby. We always come up with their middle names first, and then we move on to their first names. And we really struggled this time to find a middle name for a boy. We had known what a middle name for a girl would be since we were pregnant with our 3rd. And so we really struggled. We did finally find one, but it wasn't, like, we were then struggling to find first names that went with it. And it was just kind of like, we were humming and hawing over it. And then all the while we were also looking for girls' names. We knew what her middle name would be. But my husband and I kind of struggle with girls' names. We have very different taste on girls' names. He loves like a good gender neutral name, and I am very against gender neutral names. Growing up, my name was Jordyn, very gender neutral, and I hated it. I always wanted a more feminine name, so I was very, very nitpicky about names. I really wanted my girls to have very feminine names. So we struggled to find names that we both liked. But one day we were in church and my husband had heard the name Sierra, and he got this feeling. He was like, that is close. He's like, that's close. And so he couldn't like not think about it. And he then thought of the name Sienna, and he texted it to me and he said, what do you think of the name Sienna? And our rule, because we have such a hard time agreeing on names for girls, was that we cannot veto them right away. We have to like sit with it. So I sat there and I sat with the name. I said it with her middle name, and I got this overwhelming feeling that that was the baby's name. And so I told him I liked it. I didn't tell him that I felt that way, because we didn't even know that she was a girl at this point. We were not even there yet. And when we got home, we talked about it a little more, and I told him, I was like, I feel like that's her name. And he said, I do too. He's like, when I said it out loud, he's like, I thought, that's it. That's her name. Like, this is the name of this baby. And from then on, she was Sienna. We found out she was a girl. We were not even a little bit surprised. We kind of both just knew at that point. We had a feeling, and we felt like she completed our family. I have been a stay-at-home mom since my oldest child was about 6 months old. I went to work right after he was born, not right after, but when he was about 12 weeks old, after he had come home from the NICU. And working was fine. It wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do. My mom always worked, and so I kind of always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. But then something happened at work where they had decided, my job had decided to do something a little bit shady that definitely impacted my family and my work schedule and things like that. So I ended up quitting, and I ended up becoming a stay-at-home mom with probably the intention of finding a different job later. But I enjoyed being home with my baby so much. And after we had, because when I was working at my job, we were able to, since I worked at the same place as my husband, we were able to kind of offset our schedules just enough so that we only needed a babysitter 1 day a week. And it ended up being family, and we loved that. But having to get a new job would mean that we would have to put our child in daycare. And daycare was so expensive, and any job that I had we would maybe be bringing home maybe an extra $100 a month, because daycare was just going to be so expensive for him. And if we wanted to have more kids, it was just going to get worse from there. And so we decided that there wasn't really a point in working, and in fact it would probably be more financially beneficial if I stayed home with our children. And I have been a stay-at-home mom ever since. It is not my plan to always be a stay-at-home mom. My goal with my YouTube channel and with social media in general is that hopefully one day I can make some money and be able to go back to school, because I never actually finished college because I was very young whenever I got pregnant the first time. I was only 21, but I would want to go back and finish college and get my degree in early childhood education and go back and be a teacher. And I know that a lot of people have they're like, oh, teachers are leaving the field a lot lately. So there are a lot of teachers who do not recommend becoming a teacher, and I get that, but that's just where I sit with my long-term goals right now, is that I am hopeful that I can go back to school once all my kids are in school and get a degree to be an educator. And there you have it. That is me and my motherhood in like a little nutshell. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will maybe do this again sometime because it was kind of fun to get ready and chat with you guys. So yeah, if you enjoy motherhood content, homemaking content, that is what I do here. So feel free to like and subscribe. That will really help me out. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everybody who watches my videos. I love you all so much, and I will see you tomorrow.